Okay, so today on the Live on Form podcast, we're joined by Dr. Phil Price. How are you, Phil?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Splendid. So Phil is senior lecturer, and I'm going to let you tell people in what programs at St. Mary's University that is renowned for its strength and conditioning programs.
Yeah, so I teach, well, with St. Mary's, you teach across many different programs, so it's hard to say I just teach here. I predominantly teach on the undergraduate degree in strength and conditioning, but I also teach on our masters. We actually have two masters in strength and conditioning. One is off-site, so predominantly it's online. And then there's like a 2-week block in June where everyone comes in for on-site lectures and all the assessments are done then. And then there's an on-site masters, which is similar content, but it's where people come in 2 to 3 days a week for taught content that way. So it all depends on how people like learning and if they can get around their current jobs. On top of that, also teaching our masters in biomechanics. And we're just starting a brand new prof doc in strength and conditioning, which starts now. I am predominantly involved with the teaching for that towards the end. So the prof doc is very similar to how they do doctoral studies in America, where there's like 2 years of taught content, and then you go into doing your thesis. So we've got 2 years of taught content, which is online. So anyone within the world can sign up. And then once you get to the thesis part of it, that's when you have your own team. So I'll be joining a number of PhD teams once that gets going. So yeah, a number of courses I teach on, but all very exciting.
So needless to say, you've lived and breathed the world of strength and conditioning for the best part. Well, you've been lecturing for 10 years almost.
February 1st, it will be 12 years. But
12
I did my undergraduate at St. Mary's as well, which was 2005 to 2008. And then I started working at St. Mary's in 2010. So, and then, yeah, clearly I've not left. Part of the furniture now.
Enjoyed it so much, I decided just to stay. So yeah. You did sport, health, and exercise science, BSc, didn't you?
Yes. Funny enough, the S&C degrees didn't actually exist when I started my undergraduate degree. They didn't. So St. Mary's was the first to create the degree in strength and conditioning, which started in 2007. And then the master's started in 2010. So yeah, I did sport, health and exercise as my undergraduate, and then did strength and conditioning in 2011, straight after that. And yeah, then went on to do my PhD.
So you were in the first intake. So you were part of that first intake of the S&C.
I think I was second, actually.
Second intake.
Yeah, I'm sure I was second.
Okay.
But yeah, one of the first, you know. But and also one of the first that was online as well. So that online masters was all the way back then, way before COVID hit, where a lot of teaching's done online now. So
yeah. And then you did your PhD in bioengineering?
Yeah, bioengineering.
Do you want to expand on what that is for the listeners that don't quite know what that is?
So my PhD supervisor was Dr. Dan Cleather, and he created a mathematical model of the lower limb, which has a bit more mathematical detail around the knee. So originally I wanted to work with the model because I wanted to find out a little bit more about the knee. And what the model does, it tries to estimate forces that go through the knee, so sort of bone on bone forces, and the musculature, what kind of forces the muscles are generating during certain movements. And at the time I had terrible knees. In 2012, I ruptured my ACL during a weightlifting competition, which I actually have on video. It's on my Instagram somewhere. It's not the best for those that are squeamish
and watching,
but it makes an interesting sound. So my PhD wanted to utilize that to try and figure out, you know, what goes on at the knee. At first, it sort of started around trying to figure out, you know, usually the knee is a joint that is at the mercy of the hip and the foot. It's not as stable as the hip and the foot. And usually whenever there's a problem at the knee, it's usually come from the top, so either the hip or at the foot. So I wanted to look at a bit more detail into that. And then as I went through the PhD, I had a bit of a detour because I was leaning towards health at the time, because I was thinking of maybe going on to further study medicine. And so I actually utilized it with osteoarthritis patients.
Okay.
But yeah, since then I've moved back to sort of sport performance and rehabilitation within my sort of like 2 strands of research now.
Okay. And how are your knees now?
So the knees are actually okay. I've had 4 knee surgeries in total.
Right.
So after rupturing my first ACL, which was my right one, I then wanted to get back to rugby. Really, I'd taken a step out of rugby to focus on weightlifting. Yep. I thought, you know what, I want to get back to rugby. And then 13 months later, the last preseason game just before the season started, I ruptured the ACL on my other leg. So, and that had complications. So I had 2 further arthroscopies to clear out some scar tissue from there. So it was 4 knee surgeries in 4.5 years. And by then my body'd had enough, I think, of going under general anesthetic. But ever since then, they've been absolutely fine, my knees, actually. No real problem. So that's why I'm trying to deviate into other sports now. I just try and avoid sports which involve change of direction or anything like that. I'm clearly not very skillful.
And it has to be linear.
Yeah, exactly. Put me in a straight. I mean, that's how I played rugby anyway. It's like straight line, crash ball 12 anyway. But yeah, I try and keep everything linear now. But I'm still weightlifting actually, and just learning about how the body works. My programming's got better, and while I've not got back to the loads that actually ruptured my ACL, I feel I move much better. I feel much better. So,
okay. And you were a lead tutor with British Weightlifting Association as well, right?
Yeah, I did that for 2 or 3 years. I haven't taught with British Weightlifting for quite some time now. And funny enough, when I ruptured my ACL, I sort of fell out of love with weightlifting. And there was a part of me that felt that there was a trend in S&C that put too much emphasis on weightlifting at the time. And I just grew tired of it. So I took a step out and focused on my PhD studies. So that's why I'd stopped. That's why I haven't done any work with British weightlifting for quite some time now.
Yeah, there was that phase, wasn't there, where it was, you know, everybody was like, right, everybody's going to be doing weightlifting. It went from nobody doing anything, not even like derivatives, to doing everything. You know, you had like rugby players doing full snatches and full cleans, and you know, it just got crazy for a while, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was like strength in big capital letters, and then conditioning. You know, it really was that for a bit. And whenever you hear about, I like what you're doing with your athletes. Oh yeah, this athlete is well good. He can power clean this and squat that. Yeah. And it was just like, well, okay, that's great. But how does that translate to the field? How does that translate to their performance? I mean, yes, you're developing physical qualities during the strength training, but just focusing purely on numbers doesn't always tell the whole story of how good an athlete is. And I got a bit tired of it. So I wanted to focus on other things at the time, still within the S&C domain. But luckily, I think that the S&C community has realized that there's a bit more to athletic training than just that. And, you know, the other factors such as agility, sprinting have stepped up and got the recognition they deserved. And it's put everything on an equal pedestal. You know, they're all tools you can use. You just use them appropriately. No, there isn't one like weightlifting is superior to the other. You know, it's finding the right tool for the right athlete.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've certainly been in that kind of field whilst it went through huge transitions and huge changes. You know, I mean, you know, I've watched as an observer to a lot of it, and it's, you know, it's certainly gone through a lot of trends and a lot of, you know, it kind of turned one off and then went to another and then turned another one off and went back to another. And then all of a sudden somebody went, hold on, we can turn all these on. These are all cool. We can use them all and utilize them all. And it was just interesting to see. And obviously, you know, we were having a chat just off camera before about, you know, how that world's changed and the you know, the embracing of strength and conditioning as a thing, right? You know, obviously, you know, when we did our undergraduates, it didn't exist. It was, you know, if you wanted to do that, you went and did a weightlifting qualification, and all of a sudden you're an S&C expert. And it was, and that was kind of it. It was, you know, you were kind of a personal trainer who could do weightlifting, and you know, you might have had a degree in, you know, whatever it might be if you were fortunate, and that was it. Whereas then St. Mary's kind of, you know, they led the field with that, and that was the first one that sort of came out. And within my world, certainly, it's always been something that's been very highly spoke of with respect to, you know, the output and the type of people that were coming through it. And obviously, you know, I would imagine a lot of your graduates have now populate many of the professional clubs and professional sports, and I'm sure there's probably a myriad of names there. I'm sure that have been taught under you who are now looking after some very big names, right?
Yeah, it's really exciting as well, because that just ends up expanding my own knowledge. So for example, if someone goes off to work with Tottenham and then they're there for like 3 or 5 years, and then I see them again, they're just giving you all this wealth of information of all the stuff that they've done the last 5 years. And, that just ends up improving my knowledge of the area, my teaching, because I then try and incorporate these ideas into my own teaching and that sort of thing. So yeah, very, very, very lucky. And that helps that St. Mary's was the first, because we've had a lot of those that started early. Because they started early, they've been in the industry for so long, so they've got all that wealth of experience, that adds up over time. So those great conversations you can have just end up improving your own knowledge.
And different sports, right? Is that the one challenge I guess you have is that you're very limited as the sports that you actually delve into with respect to taking all that academia and all that that subject matter and going, right, I'm actually going to apply this to a particular sport, and I'm going to get feedback from that particular sport and become more refined at that. And this is probably why you get people who end up almost football, the S&C qualify, but they're football specialists, or they're rugby specialists, or they're Olympic track specialists, or whatever it might be. So I guess it's nice to get that feedback coming back, right?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, at the end of the day, like S&C is kind of like a set of principles that you can apply to any sport. So if you're new to a sport, that just means if you've got the right tools, you can sort of fit in quite well. The only thing that you're really learning that's brand new is the culture of that sport, because every culture within sport is so different for each other. So I sometimes think of the principles and how you apply that as more the science, and then the culture side and how you fit in within that is a bit more the art side, where you try and appropriately apply it to the sport and the individual. So that's the bit that's hard to learn unless you have been in that environment. So the best way I'm going to learn about that environment is through conversations, because obviously I'm at St. Mary's. I don't have time to go and spend a lot of time at all these different sports. So that's why it's great to keep in touch with all the students that have come through St. Mary's. And like you said, as we were speaking just before we went live, loads of students have come from being coaches at their sport, and then they've come to learn S&C, and then they've used that to go alongside their actual coaching. So they're already well versed within the culture and have an understanding of how the athletes work. And then they just come in and apply those S&C principles, and all of a sudden you've got the perfect S&C coach already there. So people are creating their own jobs now. It isn't just like you do your degree and then it's like, okay, right, I'm qualified, so I want to, what job should I apply for? It's not like that. And I'd argue it should never be like that. I think everyone should be coaching throughout their undergraduate degree, throughout their master's degree. That's the bread and butter of what you want to do if you want to be an S&C coach. The university degree is just the supplement. It's the thing you add on to learn the critical thinking skills, to learn the theory behind it, to try and help your critical reasoning. It's not like you go in and come out a perfect example of an S&C coach. It's not like that. So the ones that are the best students, the ones that understand that, and are the ones that are coaching all the way through their degree. And because they're coaching, they're experienced to that environment, they have more ideas and more questions to ask. So that then expands their own knowledge. And at the end of the day, if once they finish their degree, I want them to be a much better S&C coach in their sport than I would ever be. That's the aim. If I haven't done that, then I haven't done my job properly.
Yeah, I guess was it the recent was it the NSCA conference where they did a huge survey, didn't they, of everybody in the room? And I believe there was 500-600 people there or whatever, and they did a big survey as to what were the skills that they'd like to acquire that would make them better coaches. And obviously they had a lot of the academic sort of things, biomechanics, blah blah blah. They had this kind of list, and communication came out on top, magnificently over everything else. And that was the thing they struggled with, was the ability to communicate this academic practice and these really honed, refined sort of things into a communicable way, and get them across to an athlete, and not just one athlete, athletes who need different communication methods. And this was always one of the things I talk about in coaching, and still do, is that it's your ability to be able to take that information and relay it to multiples of different people in different ways very, very quickly, right? Very, very efficiently.
Yeah, definitely. I actually revamped one of my third year modules to try and incorporate that a little bit more. So I like my teaching to be quite discussion based. I don't go to a lecture to say, okay, this is all my knowledge, here it is. A lot of the time I'm presenting some background, I'm presenting some questions, and sometimes I don't know the answers to the questions because it's so multifactorial that you don't fully know the answer. You can just discuss the limitations, pros and cons, that sort of thing, and you can come to an idea of what you would do if you were placed in a certain situation, but that situation is probably going to be different, and then your application is going to be different. So what I've tried to do with this third year module is to create more questions to allow for more reflection, so that people can come from doing either a work placement or coaching, whatever it may be, and they can actually start to like ask questions to the group, reflect, okay, how was my communication? What was my coaching skills? You know, develop, they call them the soft skills, don't they?
Yeah.
And the best way, I guess, of learning that is in the environment. We can start to recreate the environment at the university, but it's never going to be exactly the same as the actual environment. So if we can create like a space where people can discuss their experiences, especially around communication, I think that will allow them to reflect on what they're experiencing in the professional environment, and hopefully they'll go back with new ideas of how to relate to other athletes or communicate with other members of staff. Because ultimately that is, you know, you could be the most knowledgeable person in the world, but if you don't know how to get that information to those that need it based on your position within the institution, then it falls on deaf ears.
Yeah. And I guess it's something you probably had way more experience than I have in this, but you know, one of the things that I learned from, you know, dealing with kind of coaches who were in those environments, those professional environments, was that it's almost an intimidating thing where you go in and you're surrounded by a bunch of people you actually know, but you know them indirectly because they're professional athletes. And you go in and you know, you're this, you know, theoretically a kid, right? You've gone in, you're new to the world, you're new to the environment, you're new to the club, but you're the expert in that field. And that's what you've been brought in to do. And what I found was that a lot of these people that were going in qualified and able to do that were quite intimidated by the environment because they're surrounded by people who had years and years and years of hands-on experience in that particular sport. And therefore their decisions were being influenced by the athletes themselves. So the athletes would be turning around going, I don't want to do that. I like doing this. And what it was, the best coaches were the ones who were able to almost stand up for themselves and go, no, you're not to be doing that because this is the effect it's having on you and it's not good.
Yeah.
You know? And I'd get this conversation quite often where, you know, an athlete had come to me, and I dealt with a lot of athletes throughout my time. And fortunately, again, what you were saying before is that I had the opportunity to deal with general public, but also along the way, a lot of very high-end athletes. And you'd get this conversation that said, well, what does your S&C coach let you do? I mean, like anything I want, you know, I'm really good at deadlifting, so he lets me deadlift all the time. I said,
yeah.
But hold on, you've got and I remember I dealt with an NFL athlete. You know, he won Rookie of the Year in his junior year, and we got him a glute ham raise, and he couldn't do a glute ham raise. Phenomenal athlete, but I put him on a glute ham raise, and he couldn't do a glute ham raise.
Wow.
And it was, you know, and his posterior weakness was unbelievable. It was because he was surrounded by, you know, he had yes people. He had these young lads who were looking after him, who were so intimidated by him that they never dared sort of say, you shouldn't be doing that. You know, have you encountered that? Is that, because again, I guess a lot of these people resonate towards sports they love and they enjoy. So they end up in these clubs where they kind of know all the players, don't they? They're sort of, I know these guys.
Yeah. To be honest, examples of that I can imagine happening, but people keep them close to their chest because they don't want to admit they don't have the effect on the athlete that they'd like. So if they're a yes man, it's almost like, no, it's all about communication. But really, you're just allowing them to do what they want to do. And it shows how different the personality of elite athletes is compared to the general population. The reason they're an elite athlete is because they're completely headstrong and know what they want. So they're going to do whatever they think is right to get where that is. So for you to become part of that is difficult. And sometimes it's quite easy just to sort of roll alongside that. Like they don't have the sort of sports science and strength and conditioning knowledge behind it, but they know what they want. So you need to fill that gap, but finding a way into having that athlete trust you, because it's going to be a trust issue, is really difficult. And I think it's something that people don't want to admit as much. I did go to a really good conference actually with Arete not too long ago with Buddy Morris, and he started talking about how he started programming more based on the personality of the athlete he was working with, which I thought was a really interesting idea. And he was talking about someone like bench, so we did more bench, where someone else preferred to be a bit more creative, so we started incorporating more sort of pressing with cables, that sort of thing. At the end of the day, he just wanted their pressing strength to improve, but he didn't mind how they got there, but he used their personality to help his decision making. Because ultimately, if you're going to be really stubborn and not let an athlete, or make sure an athlete does something he doesn't want to do, then all of a sudden that's the negative. That's not going to work. So usually there's many tools to use. So sometimes you can utilize the athlete's personality to help your decision making there.
Yeah, and you know, it goes back to general public, right? At the end of the day, somebody's not going to continuously do something they don't enjoy, right? You know, if you enjoy, you know, I know throughout my career, and I'm sure with you as well, that, you know, your own training, right? You go through little phases of, I really enjoy doing this, and then you kind of, you fall out of love for it. But because you understand the mechanics of it, you go, right, but I'm going to do this instead. So I'm still doing the same thing. I'm just doing it in a different way. So, you know, and I know that you continue to be an avid athlete, but you've changed your focus. So you were rugby, weightlifting, other things.
Yeah. So now I've actually started, I don't know if you've seen, started a podcast called The Progress Theory. And a lot of that is around looking at scientific principles, discussing scientific principles, and then looking at the practical application of them to try and optimize human performance. So from that, it's been quite broad, and we've looked at a number of different topics. What we've done in the past was we've had like a particular challenge, and then we looked at the training and the science behind the rationale for the training and discussed those on episodes. So I did one with like trying to get a 5K under 20 minutes. Then myself and Dale Green, a coach, we did a concurrent training challenge where we were improving the strength in certain lifts while training for a marathon. Since then, I've been working with Cult Media. So definitely check them out if you want to develop sort of the producing side of podcasts. We've been doing some stuff with scientists, athletes, and coaches discussing various aspects of human performance. Really, it isn't just S&C, quite a wide range. And what we're doing now is we're trying to incorporate all of the seasons that we've had into a brand new direction, where I will be doing a particular challenge based on a certain topic, and then the seasons that we'll have will be geared towards that particular challenge and that particular topic. So I'm really interested in looking at sort of concurrent training and looking at the development of strength alongside the development of endurance. And so what the seasons are going to be focused on are towards, okay, one, concurrent training, maybe look into the interference effect, how much does it affect training? Does it affect training at all? That sort of thing. Then we're going to do one on triathlon, because I want to work my way up to an Ironman. And then we're going to do one on strength and power training. So because I ruptured my ACL, the aim is to try and surpass the weight that I've that ruptured my ACL. So I want to try and do that while training for an Ironman. And the idea is I'm going to write up all of those seasons into a book, which I hope to release next summer. So actually, that's the first time I've announced that. So this is the plan, the exclusive. So that's essentially where my training is heading now, focusing on weightlifting performance at the same time as developing sort of ultra endurance, quite Fergus Crawley, Jonathan Payne type stuff. I interviewed Jonathan Payne for the Progress Theory. His episode comes out next Monday. one of the nicest blokes I think I've ever met. I loved talking to him, and I love the stuff that they're doing. So obviously Fergus is a powerlifter and a very good ultra endurance athlete. So I'm going to try and look at the development of weightlifting alongside endurance as well, because the research is a bit equivocal, but if there's any type of training that seems to get affected most by adding a load of endurance training, it seems to be anything which involves moving fast. So power seems to be the one that seems to have a bit of a drop off because of the interference effect. That could be due to the fatigue of certain muscle fibers from that, whereas strength training, which is quite technically, especially at heavy level, is quite slow. So you're using a lot of slow twitch fibers, similar to what you're doing with the ultra endurance stuff. Maybe the fatigue of the fast twitch fibers actually gets affected more, and therefore anything involving power seems to be more affected. But that's what I want to investigate a little bit more. It's like doing a thesis in a way. I'm going to do the research, put things into a training program, and be really brutally honest of how well it goes, because we've got a lot of scientists saying one thing, people putting it into practice, but I want to show the journey between one from the other. So that's the aim of it. So yeah, that was a long answer for what kind of training am I doing now, but that's where I'm looking to focus.
It's fascinating because again, this Fergus and Johnny are both ambassadors of our brand, so we're very familiar with what they do, and part of that kind of conversation we had with them was all about hybrid training, which is obviously hybrid training is it could be a million different hybrids of whatever, but in their case it's this strength and endurance and bringing those together. And obviously this takes me back to my powerlifting days of, the kind of Louis Simmons, West Side, and, training different modalities almost at the same time, which was always quite an interesting thing because, they were always talking about this drop off and the fact that when they start training speed, that their overall maximum strength went down when they started training. So I guess that, that research and that thesis as such that you're going to be producing is very, very relevant to a lot of sports in many respects, where people forget. And I always remember this, it was almost like a bit of an epiphany where there was I can't remember who it was said it. I'm trying to think whilst I'm talking about it, but anyways, it may come to me, but the whole thing about marathon runners, right? It took them years to figure out that the fastest person wins. They were like, we're training these people to move really slowly over a long period of time. And that was how training for marathons used to be, right? It used to be, we're just training people to run slowly for a long period of time, and whoever does it the best wins. But then they were like, well, the fastest person wins. So we should really be training these people for speed. And then it was this whole thing where, oh, okay, so if we start doing that, they'll probably get faster, right? And then, and then the fastest person wins, right? So I mean, there's so much carryover to what you're talking about there that probably people don't quite get, because and again, general public will probably think, marathon running is just running slowly for a long period of time, which I guess if you just want to tick that box of I ran a marathon, I guess that's what it is. But if you want to win a marathon, all different ballpark, right? And you're starting to get into those things that you're talking about, which is fascinating, right? Well, it's fascinating to me and you.
Exactly. Well, because concurrent training has been around for ages, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I think Alex Viada was the one that termed hybrid training, but concurrent training itself has been around for ages. So the use of strength training to improve endurance running, or the use of developing some form of aerobic base to help recovery for your strength work if you were a powerlifter or wherever it might be. But I guess, you're doing a small amount of the opposite to try and help supplement you being good in your specific domain. Whereas now people are challenging that a little bit more, just like Fergus is, and he's trying to push both at the same time, which is clearly much more difficult. And you've got to consolidate all the different stressors, and then you've got to rank them, and then you've got to think, okay, to improve, I need to do this. The list could be really, really long. So now you've got to consolidate stresses. Was okay, out of this list of like 30 points, 1 to 7 could be developed through training just in this one way. So that's all done. And because if you try to fit everything into 1 week, you just completely burn out. It's not all about some kind of interference effect. It's the fact that your body can't do that much work.
And recovery, right? Because recovery is different for every single one of them. You know, you would use different recovery modalities and different recovery techniques for different types of training, right? So all of a sudden it starts to become quite complicated.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the best recovery method is a well-programmed program.
Yeah.
You can add all sorts of different things, which certainly will help. But at the end of the day, if your program is the thing that's not allowing you to recover for your particular sessions where you want to really perform, then you're never going to progress in the right way. Actually, I was thinking this the other day when thinking of things to bring up on this podcast, because I wanted to ask your opinion. Everyone's looking for certain things that they think might help improve or help reduce the chance of injury. But unless the program is sufficient to allow for recovery and they are getting sufficient nutrition, water, and sleep, then the program is almost irrelevant. You need those 3 or 4 things to be good first before you start thinking of the specifics. I think a lot of that came from my ideas around being a biomechanist. You know, if I get someone landing off a box on one leg and watch how they land, and I film them and I measure the knee angles at certain positions, I want to know that they can land properly so they don't put the knee in a very dangerous position. And yeah, there's some link to some form of frontal plane kinematic analysis of like, okay, there may be a link. If they land really badly, that shows up in the frontal plane, that may increase the chance of injury. But that's something that can be taught and removed quite quickly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the things that are going to reduce the chance of injury are the basic stuff of sleep, nutrition, hydration, and having a good quality of life. You need those first before you can start looking at the minutiae of how well they land. It's interesting.
There's rabbit holes, isn't there? There's a million rabbit holes you could go down here. I mean, hydration. Let's touch on hydration. I mean, altitude affects hydration. It affects how much fluid. You know, we actually had an incident many years ago where we had an athlete who we were monitoring very, very tightly. I mean, blood, saliva testing. We were monitoring literally everything. And there's a chap, a physio I used to work quite closely with, Kevin, who you will probably know of. If I'll tell you his full name later. I won't divulge it on the podcast because the last thing he wants is people knocking on his door trying to get a physio. But we had a discussion about hamstring tear, which occurred at the time, and it was actually down to, he ascertained it was down to because we were training in one of the UK facilities, which you'll know of, and we were actually training on the sprint track, which is in the roof. And he said because the fluid loss would have been far greater where we were training because of the humidity. And that would have been a large factor in as to why he had the hamstring tear that he had at the time. And it was down to, he ascertained it was down to the loss, because we were monitoring fluid levels. This guy was sleeping in a hypoxic chamber. It was full blown analysis of literally everything. It was crazy. So we knew every data point. And he said the only thing he could put it down to was the fact that we'd gone into this roof area and actually done the sprinting in this roof area, because it didn't happen at the start or the end. It happened in the middle of the session. So there wasn't a warm-up issue. There wasn't and he put it down to dehydration of the tissue. So, everything right down to, hydration levels, especially elite levels, right? Hydration becomes a massive, massive factor. But we talk a lot to the general public, and, our narrative is all about human performance, right? Which, was what you were kind of bridging onto before. And we talk a lot about sleep. We talk about circadian rhythm. We talk about the patterns with respect to circadian rhythm. We talk about hydration, how important hydration is just for general function, just somebody be able to, cognitively and physically perform throughout the course of the day. And we don't mean perform as in knocking elite numbers out here and there. We're talking about just basic human performance. You've been able to go in on a day and lecture all day and not get home massively fatigued and tired, and what it's like when you're speaking, you forget to drink, don't you? And then you realize, I would get at the end of a conference and I'd be like, I feel terrible. and it was just down to the fact that I'd barely drank anything all day. I was hugely dehydrated, and you had the stage lights on you and you'd be sweating and blah, blah, blah. So there's all these other factors. So, I mean, just on your experience, if we were to put this across the maybe general population and elite sports, I guess, what are the things that you've seen as kind of the massive factors there? You touched on sleep, you touched on hydration, you touched on a couple of things there. What do you think are your major influence then, particularly the things you look at in yourself, your own performance? What are the things that you prioritize?
The more I've programmed, the more I prioritize highly the external stresses of life. There's so many people that write up a program and then try and shove it in around everyday life. And imagine if that's someone that has a full-time job, yep. 2 kids, which yep. they've got to take to all over the place. Like that's so much stress, and people completely underestimate how much stress that has. So, say if stress is all filled into a bucket and it's filled with day-to-day life stuff, and then all of a sudden you add a load of training, then it can be really damaging for the athlete. I listened to a great lecture by Dr. Bernadette Dancy, who's a health coach, who really emphasizes this. And they're talking about, a lot of people say, oh, you're feeling stressed, just go for a run. And really, if you're adding running stress onto all the other stress that's happening. And I think that often happens within elite sport. It's something that a lot of all the best S&C coaches do take into account. It isn't just the stress that they're trying to develop through their training program. They are giving the right stimulus through their training program, added on to all the other stimuli that's been provided by externally through life, but also through the other coaches. It isn't just about, okay, this is the program I want to do. We need improved recovery. Maybe don't push as hard as you want to in that session, because then you won't need to sort of fight fire with fire, or just throw some kind of recovery strategy on them. You could just program appropriately. So I think that is probably the thing I've learnt most over the years. Funny enough, I'm sure this is rugby sevens, and I won't mention any names, but I remember they were using heart rate as a way of like tracking wellness over the week, and they noticed that someone's heart rate was really spiking up and the heart rate variability was all over the place. And they thought, well, is this person, they're not managing their training? What was happening? And the reason was they were having a really bad argument with their missus, and it was spiking them so much that they thought there was some issue with the training that they were doing. So it really does show how much, external stress can actually affect the athlete, and how then that affects your measurement techniques. They could have made the wrong decision if they didn't know what the athlete was going through. So, that's probably the areas that I would definitely have placed a higher rank as I've programmed more and more people.
I think I could be very selfish here, because this is a discussion I've had on numerous occasions about periodization. And obviously periodization models rely on you control the variables, right? Is that you control all the variables. So this is, I dealt a lot with general pop, and over the years I periodized for them, but it always failed. It just never worked. It never panned out. It never, because of exactly what you're talking about, is that life would get in the way. The kids would be up all night. They wouldn't eat very well. They'd get caught in a meeting. They wouldn't be hydrated properly. And there was all these variables. Then all of a sudden, you'd be chasing these numbers that you had in this plan. And the problem is that a person would come in, and depending on their mindset, their mentality, you talked about it before, different people. I had one particular person who, if they came in and they missed their numbers, they would beat themselves up infinitely about it. So they'd leave the session feeling very unproductive and feeling like they hadn't achieved much. The concurrent effect is that they ate badly. So we kind of lost on so many fronts. And then they come into the next session actually quite down and not very positive about what they were just about to try and achieve. So I pulled it and I stopped doing it as much. And that was all to do with these variables that you're talking about there. So it was all about, so periodization. What's your view on that? Because again, I've had this discussion with a lot of coaches. I've had this, and I think you're probably the closest, I think, that somebody's actually pinpointed what I've been talking about in the discussion and said, this is kind of the thing that I would have considered a bit more.
I mean, long-term periodization, I find really quite difficult. I think it's something that you can have a rough idea of where you want to go, but ultimately the program wouldn't necessarily fail if you didn't reach that, as long as that you were improving. So I don't mind if someone's working like in certain blocks, or they're working sort of conjugates, so they're trying to develop things at a very similar rate, or they're like microdosing. I don't really mind how people structure it. What I would argue is that as long as their athlete is actually improving, that's still important. So I'm going to pick like real arbitrary numbers here. Say that they squat 100, and for some reason I want them to squat 120 because I've linked being stronger in this particular motion is actually going to be a good determinant of performance. Say they're weightlifting. However, if I do it over 8 weeks and they got to 110, I wouldn't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Because people improve at different rates. And as long as they're improving linearly over time, to me, that is still very important. I'm really happy, and funny enough, is what I'm really doing this week in my own training, is that I'm doing the same program as I did last week. There were certain issues which I found really challenging last week on certain movements that were really important to my overall goals. So I want to do the same thing this week, but my rating of exertion for myself, the subjective measure, is much lower. That to me means I've actually improved. Yes, the numbers actually haven't gone up, but I've improved because that is so much easier. People are so keen to rush the programming to get to that end number by adding like, okay, it's got to be 5 kg added this week, then there's another 2.5. And it's just like, you get to a point where that person just can't push anymore. And it's one of the reasons why I'm a bit funny when everyone's trying to release like an 8-week program. Because it then forces people to think about peaking at the end, and that's it. I mean, you've been in this game for so long. How many people do you know that you go, oh, what's your maximum squat? Oh, it's 200 kilos. Oh, when did you do that? Oh, 3 years ago after a squatting cycle. So, well, you haven't progressed over time. You just peaked and then you just dropped. So you didn't progress. And that's, I think, quite a problem. Like, and I'm probably guilty when I try and think, oh, I want to do this, and then I do this. I structure everything towards these different things that I end up, after I've reached them, I just go back down to base level. So over the years, I haven't actually improved as much as I'd want. And I think it's, just having like, okay, you've got to hit that target and hit that target, rather than just sticking to certain things that you want to improve over time. And then that translates more because you just have a linear progression over subsequent years. Yes, it doesn't look linear when you look at it microcyclically, but if you just take a step back macrocyclically, yes, everything looks a bit linear. So that's where I think a lot of problems are. It's people rushing, people desperate to show progression by adding more load, when really you can just take your time and the athlete will just end up improving anyway because they've had more practice at that particular movement, skill, whatever it might be. So don't rush. Don't go through like one 8-week program and then quickly move on to the next one. And then you probably, if you did an 8-week program, you're probably best doing the 8-week program and then doing it again straight after, because you'd have a new base to sort of balance that off. But everyone's so desperate to try the new thing. I had a great conversation with an MMA and S&C coach called Chris Meir, and he talked about, he didn't like to admit it, but quite often that those that he believes are doing the wrong training, but they've been doing the wrong training consistently over years, have got better because they're not chopping and changing what they're doing. He believes what they're doing isn't not necessarily appropriate for them, but they could do it better.
Believe it.
But because they were consistent, they've improved. So that's where I see problems going. It's people rushing for the sake of showing type of progression or trying to desperately hit a certain value in a time frame which they think they might get to or they may not, but they don't know because they don't know how well they're going to adapt to the training. And
that's that huge variability of the human body, right? Is that it always, it comes down to that, right? It's this, weight loss. Let's talk about probably the biggest metric that most people are chasing and have been chasing for years in the general population is weight loss. But weight loss isn't linear. It never has been, never will be. It fluctuates. It goes up and down like yo-yo. It's meant to do that. There's adaptive changes your body's going through. but people are looking for this linear thing. Now, the biggest challenge that I had with weight loss with people is that if I had somebody who tracked it, and again, I'll for a bit of anecdote and a tale here, is that I had a client that used to weigh himself 3 times a day. Now, at that point, when I was dealing with him, it was habitual. So I've either got to try and get him out of that habitual behavior, or I've got to explain the habitual behavior to him. So it was easier for me to explain it to him than for him to stop it. It would have been a far bigger challenge for me to stop it. It's a bit like, when you're dealing with people for, getting them stronger, it's far easier to find the weaknesses, which will in turn make their key lift stronger. It's far easier to pick out weaknesses than it is to find strengths and continue to, push those strengths, right? So I just said, look, plot it on a graph for me. And what will happen? It'll do this. Go down, go up, and then go down, go up. I said, and when it does that, it's great. It means there's shifts and there's things occurring. So he started plotting it. Whereas what would happen is he would come in really down if his weight had gone up. And he was doing exactly what I told him. He was adamant, and I actually believed him completely. Certain people, that they are actually doing what you tell them. And he was adamant. He was doing everything that, and he was analyzing it. So I said, just watch it. It's going to go down, then it's going to go up, and then it's going to go down. And it will follow that pattern, provided you're consistent, like what you said. Is that, a bad program done consistently will probably yield results. So I said, just monitor it. So he started monitoring it. And the days where he would come in and you'd see him, he was flat. He wouldn't train very hard. He'd be making mistakes on his diet. And it was because his weight had gone up that morning. And he weighed himself, his weight had gone up. So I explained it to him. Then when his weight had gone up, he got all excited. So he'd come in, my weight went up this morning because he knew what was coming next was it was going to go down again. So all he knew was that he had to keep doing what he was doing. So it was taking this number, this rudimental number, where he expected it to go straight, like a straight line. Somebody in a squat, it's not going to go up in a straight line. If it is, chances are they probably just completely misdetermined how strong they were to start with, right? And it'll go up linearly for a while, and then it'll start to go up and down like a yo-yo, depending on life. So, it was all those factors. Anyways, it was an interesting story, and it was an interesting take on how that line that people expect, right? Just like you said, is that they expect that to go up. So what you're doing is actually in conflict with that, isn't it? Is that you're going, look, I'm going to take 2 different modalities and I'm going to get them to go, both of them to go up at the same time. That's the challenge, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's what makes it so difficult, because ultimately you're going to favor one over the other at different points throughout the year. Just because of the amount of volume that you'd have to do to really try and improve, to make way, you need to sort of take a step back. But yeah, it's a balancing act between trying not to take too much of a step back on one modality to the point where you lose the improvements that you've made, but also you don't want to take too small of a step back, because that will probably come with a certain fatigue cost, and then that fatigue cost may affect you training in the other modality. So it's a real balancing act. And this challenge that I described with the book and the progress there of the podcast, I'm kind of starting it off at the moment. And right now I'm taking a step back to see how my body reacts to certain stressors. So now is the time to make a few mistakes if I start to feel tired, because, I'll structure the week in a certain way, but I don't know how I'm going to feel once I've done that. I come from more of a strength background. So my perceived fatigue and how hard a session on a bike, for example, is going to be much harder than like a session. So if you come from like a triathlon background, they'll probably spend 4 hours on a bike and it'll be really easy for them if they're doing low intensity, steady state work. Whereas that is really taxing for me, because I don't come from that background. So the effect on me is completely different. So me at the moment is really trying to move things around to see how I respond. I'm actually headed off to Bordeaux on the 15th of October. So I've got a bit of time to sort of play around, find how my body is responding, so I can then plan ahead for the last stretch leading up till Christmas. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Are you doing your own programming?
I am.
Yeah.
But I am doing that in respect to conversations I'm having with people either I work with or people that I interview on the progress theory. So like really probably one of the best weightlifting coaches in the whole country, Sean Joffe. I've been speaking a lot with him, and he's helping me with my weightlifting program. And then I've sort of developing ideas around triathlon stuff. I wouldn't say I'm like an expert in triathlon. It's something that I'm learning because I don't come from that sort of background. Yep. But I'm hoping that alongside that season when we look at triathlons, I'll be able to speak with experts in the area that will help me tweak what I attempt to do. And I've obviously spoke to Johnny, and his episode was great. It's filled me with loads of ideas. And I'm constantly reading around. So yeah, so it isn't, I'd like to say it isn't just me, because I've got great ideas, and the idea behind the project is that I'm putting things into practice and then being very honest with my reflection of how well they've gone. But you're always not fully aware of your own biases. And you always have like a temptation to program the stuff that you like doing. And I know that I do that. I do it without realizing. Because as soon as someone else programs a session for me, I'm feeling absolute pieces after it. So clearly I have a tendency to do that. I like how I program. I think it's appropriate for me, and I'm good at pushing and pulling back when I need to. But you know, the thing with unconscious bias is that you're unconscious to it. So it's good to have someone looking over everything that you've done or are doing, because that's how you learn. You learn by other people critiquing your stuff. Yeah. So yeah, I'm you know, I'd love to speak to as many people as possible. I'm always open.
So where do you think your bias is going to sit? Which is your preference right now?
I'd always preference towards strength training because it's what I enjoy more. And I find being on a bike uncomfortable. And I know that's the key thing that I need to improve on when it comes. I've done a half iron before, and the bike is what let me down. I feel uncomfortable on the bike for that longer period. I just don't have I've been weight training since I was 16. I haven't been road cycling for nowhere near that long. So no wonder the position, the skill has got to take a bit of time to get used to. And you know that old saying, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I need to do that. So yeah, I'll probably have a tendency to lean towards the domain that I feel most comfortable in.
It's a long time, 4 hours.
It really is on those seats.
Yeah.
Is
I would turbo trainer sat here, and it's anything post an hour, I'm feeling that for a couple of days.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
It's just general discomfort. It's my back aches, and I feel you on that. 4 hours. That's a long time.
But as long as I'm honest and progress slowly, the body will just adapt to it. So that's the aim. Don't rush that. Don't go from like 1 hour week 1 to 2 hours week 2, for example, because that's an increase of 100% volume. It's like you wouldn't do that with a squat. So why would you do that with a bike? Yeah. Especially if like you feel the effects of the bike more because you have less of a training history in it. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to I'd say the next 4 weeks, because I'm going to learn a lot about myself. So
very cool. So advancements. So human performance. Let's look at the human performance spectrum, and let's have a look at where do you see advancements in human performance coming? Obviously, there's been some drastic changes in the last 15, 20 years in human performance and how we perceive it. Obviously, where you're familiar with those, you know what we're about. We talk about human performance in a very, and I hate the term for several reasons, but holistic. We talk about this very holistic human performance in that, everybody is out there, and it goes back to, we put it on a par with kind of what Bill Bauman said years ago when he put the asterisks in the Nike slogan and said, if you have a body, you're an athlete. So for us, it's, if you're working hard, whether it's physical fitness, business, family, friends, social, whatever it might be, you're performing, right? So to us, performance is very holistic. It's all about, waking up, being able to get on with your day, be busy, be attentive, be, aware of your situation, be able to perform throughout your day. Go home after a day at work and spend time with your family, be present, be able to switch off from work and other things, and be able to, switch between these things, and be able to jump in the gym and be able to perform at any point in the gym, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's cycling, weightlifting, whatever.
Mm.
We don't have I have my own personal bias as to what I enjoy doing in the gym and things like this, but it's not our narrative to kind of push that on people and go, look, you've got to be doing this. We want people to move. We want people to be mentally and physically in great places. And that's what we're about. We talk a lot about circadian rhythm. We talk about sleep. We talk about hydration, all those things. So where do you see the biggest advancements come in? Where do you see the conversation going in the world of human performance? Are there things that you're embracing, or you think you're going, the rabbit holes you're going to go down personally, or, as an S&C expert, are there certain things that you feel you're going to be digging your heels into a little bit more, the research, the science for the next few years? Big question.
That's a big question, because there's so many different rabbit holes you could potentially go down. And I think with what I often see, I've seen it, and I'll use certain examples of how it goes, is that quite often you'll have a particular domain, they'll go really one way with it, then they'll go completely to the other side of it, and then they realize that actually it's probably a combination of the two to actually get the best result. So for example, especially with coaches, like back in the day, yes, we didn't have all the information readily available to us, but those that kind of, I'm making generalized statements here, but those that sort of rose to the top were the ones that are really good. They had the chat, as some people would say, really good communication skills. They had the chat, but they didn't necessarily have the theoretical background to really have a good understanding of the programs they were developing. So that led people to go completely the other way and really hone in on the science and go, oh, this is what we need to do. The science says it. And then it led to a load of like very evidence-based practitioners who may not have been as good at communicating. So it's like, oh, hold on, we've gotten completely the other way. And now we're getting coaches that are very good at communicating, but also have like a master's and even a PhD. So we're getting that mix of everything and hitting the right spot. And I think that's what's improving coaching at the moment. You're getting a good mix of everything. People are almost being generalists. You've got coaches with a PhD. They have a good understanding of science, but they don't focus in that area. But they also have the communication skills as well. So that's developed. So I do wonder if the same thing is going to happen with technology. For example, we're going to start, I don't know if it's happening with shoes at the moment. We're going to go so far down the carbon plate, people are going to realize actually this is not great for the human body because the carbon plate is doing everything. So we return back, and then all of a sudden we get a good blend between how the shoe is working with how the foot's working. There's so many different things that could go down. I do wonder how, this idea of marginal gains. I know it was started with David Brailsford, wasn't it, with Team Sky and stuff. Everyone's looking for that little niche that's going to take them that extra 0.1%. And I think it's a good thing in a sense that 0.1% probably means nothing on its own. But when you add it to all the other 0.1% that you're getting right as well, that really quite works. There's a time, I think, that people focus so much on trying to figure out what the next best thing is that they forget the basics of like good coaching, good communication skills, and doing the basics right. So I'm hoping if we do go too far down the marginal gains rabbit hole, we'll get pulled back because we're realizing we're missing the key things that are important to developing performance. So I do wonder if we're going to, go too far, come back, go too far. And we're going to do that so many different times to the point where we get to a point that actually we've really nailed, we have a really good understanding of performance. And that's going to happen at different levels with different sports. So I reckon certain sports are going to achieve that level first than others, but others will start to catch up when they start realizing with every different sport, there's probably money to be made there. So the money gets flooded in. That's when the research, the coaches start heading in that direction. Hopefully more in different types of sports after the Olympic Games in Tokyo. I reckon like BMXing, we won gold, didn't we? We won bronze in the skateboarding. I reckon now there's going to be a load of money sent that way. So that's going to improve those areas. So Yeah, rather than I think there's going to be one particular thing that's going to dominate human performance going forward, I do wonder if we're just going to have a better understanding of mixing all the different factors. What all those different factors are, I don't fully know, and that's what I'm excited to learn about, to be honest. But I think we're going to have a better understanding of the multifactorial nature of human performance.
Love it. That's I'm totally with you. The evidence-based thing was a great thing, because it emphasized the importance of it. You know, and there was a point there where people just didn't talk about it because it wasn't relevant. I mean, when me and you graduated, nobody was really talking about it, nobody really cared. And all of a sudden everybody started caring, but you had a bunch of people who didn't understand how to read a study, who were talking about science as if it was the be all and end all. And then, like you said, it went kind of full circle in that they went, right, hold on, we need to be able to communicate these things. We need to look at things and realize that, you know, if I want to affirm something, I can affirm it with studies. You know, it doesn't matter what it is. I can tell you tomorrow that tomatoes are bad for you. I can tell you that tomatoes are good for you tomorrow. It doesn't matter. I can do that. But I need to look at the subtleties of all these things and be able to conclude something myself as a coach, and be able to make a decision. And that's ultimately what this is all about, right? Is that we've got to be able to make decisions that are best for the athletes or general public or whoever we've got in front of us at that particular time. So, and the sport thing, I think you bang on the money there. I think there's so many subtleties that they're looking for those marginal things, but then in that process, they're forgetting about the macros, right? They're forgetting about the big things, and they're forgetting about, you know, basic technique is that, you know, we knew that if you could, you know, particularly, I mean, weightlifting's probably a very, very simple one to always go back to because there's so many controlled variables, right?
Yeah.
We're like, look, weightlifting's easy. We can explain that. It's like sprinting. We can explain that. It's that easy. But it's, you know, when you start to get into multi-directional sports and things where there's technology involved. I mean, BMXing, talked about BMXing. I mean, I know very little about BMX bikes. I know quite a bit about bikes. BMX bikes are probably a whole different ballpark. Skateboarding, I know nothing about skateboards. It's and also it's this whole different sport where there's so many other factors. You know, we could talk about biomechanics, but what biomechanics when somebody's on a device that hobbles left to right and goes, wow, yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, it's exciting times. I think we're in a really exciting space. I think and I think we're not actually that far behind anymore. I think there was a point there where, you know, certainly the US, Australia, I think we're pipping us on a lot of things, and I think the UK has played catch up very, very quickly. Probably a large part of that is probably because of things that have been going on in the likes of St. Mary's. I think there's, you know, somebody's going to be driving that, and I think we had very few academic facilities as such that were driving this narrative really before, whereas now I think we've got several that are very, very good. What about you? What about your performance? Where do you see the things that you need to improve?
Personally, actually, would I be able to just add a little bit on to what you just said?
Add anything you want.
A lot of it was around sort of research. And like, you know, how I said about, you know, some people went so far down the evidence-based roles that was so reliant on what things said to make their decision. Research is there to guide. It's an investigative process which gives you a rough idea of what is going on or how something works. And quite often that research could be way ahead of its time. It's finding stuff out which we can then implement into practice. But other times it's doing studies to find out what we're already doing is working. So you're coming from different angles here. And research is an investigative process which will allow you to give an understanding of what's going on, what you believe is going on. But it doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what is to be true. That's what you're trying to find out. You're trying to find out truth, essentially. But you know, that will depend on a number of different factors of the scientific inquiry, like how good is the study? How good are your measurement techniques? You're making these interpretations based on results. Well, how did you find those results? What did you actually do? And it's those critical thinking skills, which I think are still really important. So if you are someone that is say you're a coach, it's like, well, I know what the research is saying this, but actually in my current situation, in the practical element, I don't see the application. It wouldn't work in my environment. Now, you need to have a good understanding of the surrounding literature for you to say, no, actually, that won't work for me. It isn't just like, well, that's research. What do they know? It's, you know, how good is the research? How good were the studies? They're finding one thing. Are you confident in how they measured that? And it's these kind of skills which I think are really quite important, because it's so easy to, oh, the research has just said this, should we do it? So hold on. You know, how did they find that? It's those skills which I think are really important. And now more and more coaches are getting those skills because they're doing masters, PhDs. I think it's going to be really quite exciting how people start to apply it, because, you know, they're not being told. They're like, okay, we're being guided by what they found, and then they've taken their own interpretation. They haven't read the concluding paragraph and accepted it to be true. They've actually read the study or read the group of studies and made a decision based on what they've done. Could be different from what the researchers say, but that's a good thing. That's what's going to push us. If everyone just agreed, you know, it's the same thing within like a management team. If everyone just agreed with everyone, you wouldn't push that far forward because no one's there challenging you. And it's the same with scientific inquiry. So we need that. So yeah, I guess the reason I'm pushing that, yes, I'm an academic, so I'm going to support the importance of research. But I think people either like love it or they hate it, and it's not that simple. It's there to guide, and it's there to be critiqued.
Well, I'm going to blow a little smoke here for you. Is that I think that's being led by people like yourself, because when I did my undergraduate, it was we were taught about research in it, not a different way, but with a slightly less open mind. We were taught, and again, I don't know whether you were as well, but we were taught very much that, look, if a study says this, that's what it says. And there wasn't this open-mindedness to looking and breaking the studies down into who were the studies done on, what was the criteria, you know, what was the control group, you know, what was, you know, and all these different factors that they weren't considered at the same level they are now. But that requires people at the front end, people like yourself, to be teaching the people you're teaching to look at it this way. And I think there was a distinct lack of that. I think certainly in my, you know, as I was coming through university, that was definitely something that wasn't really talked about a lot. There wasn't really a lot of this, but it only guides us. It gives us an idea of where we should probably point the rest of the research and where we should open new areas of study and blah, blah, blah. And maybe that was the topic that I chose. I mean, I did my dissertation on creatine, and at the time it had a huge body of evidence, you know, nothing compared to what it is now, you know, because it was a few years ago, but at the time, you know, there was HMB, there was bicarbonate, there was creatine, and those were the three biggies that everybody was talking about. And there was a couple of new players on the board. There was sort of beta-alanine was coming in there a little bit, and there was some others, but those were the three big players. Everybody was studying them. Everybody was talking about, you know, bicarb, HMB, creatine, and it was all this very much, let's not be too open-minded. You know, if it says what we want it to say, we'll conclude that, and that's good. So I think a lot of this is being led by people like yourself who are at the top of that mantle, and you're passing that down to people, and people are looking at you and going, well, this guy's an authority on this, and he's telling us to look at it with a little bit more of an open mind, and to consider that there's also an application aspect to it, where, you know, whereas before it was sort of, well, you'd have the evidence-based practitioner or the self-proclaimed evidence practitioner who'd be talking to the coach who's been doing something for 20 years, one of them would be arguing saying, well, we've always done it this way, and the other one would be going, but science tells you not to. And it was just this, you know, this mass collision, which, like you said, I think we've now got the people who are taking on board what people have done for years. And I think a lot of that stuff that people have done for years, particularly in kind of old school sports, like boxing is always a good example. And they're going, well, we've done this for years. And you can kind of conclude as to why they've done it for years, because it worked. Now we've got the science to reinforce why it worked.
Yeah.
Whereas we didn't know before why it worked, it just did. And it was a trial and error thing. And the same thing with nutrition. I mean, nutrition, there's so much data that now comes out where people were anecdotally doing things 30 years ago, and you were like, oh, they were right. They just didn't know they were right. You know, there wasn't science to support that what they were doing was the correct thing to do. So it was all, you know, it was trial and error and blah, blah, blah. But anyways, tangent. But I think that is, you know, and I think that's credit to people like yourself who are, you know, looking at things in a slightly different perspective. And certainly it's a very different world to the one that I first started in, you know, 25 years ago, when science was sort of looked at with this kind of, not so much, you either do it the way we've always done it, or science might tell you something.
Yeah.
So
Right,
credit to you and probably the rest of the people who are present and doing that now, because I think that's a massive change and shift in the narrative behind science.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for those kind words. I mean, like you said about like in boxing, people have been doing years and they know it works. A lot of the time, the reason why the research hasn't done it yet is because we're waiting for the measurement techniques to get better to actually measure it properly. You know, sometimes, you know, if the research has said it's a relationship or something there is not true, you know, it could be that the measurement technique just isn't good enough. So it actually is true, but we haven't measured it properly. I mean, now because technology is getting better and better, we're getting less of that. But you've got to keep an open mind. A lot of my open-mindedness comes from looking back at myself and realizing that I was too sure in my ideas at times. And I always see like people get this confidence towards the end of third year.
I absolutely concur with that.
And then as they go through masters and a bit more, you start, you know, it's that, I can't remember the graph. The more you know, the more you realize like, you don't know. Yeah. So if I didn't know this now, like what am I going to be thinking in 2 or 3 years time? So why am I going to be uber sure now? Like I've got a rough idea and these are my reasons. This is my rationale to think in this way, but I need to be open enough to realize that that could change. And I like to try and get that into my lectures really, because I would hate it if a student just copied what I said, especially if I'm wrong. There's a chance that I could be wrong. So I would hate it if I believe this and they just copy and paste. So yeah, you know, have you seen Good Will Hunting?
Yeah.
You know the bit where that guy is explaining to Ben Affleck, oh, what about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And then Matt Damon goes, oh, you're just going to recite all these people and not come up with your own idea?
Yeah.
I would hate it if people, and I think there's an element of people are doing that now, especially with Instagram, is that they'll read something and then they'll regurgitate that elsewhere. And I would hate it that people would come from my lectures and they've just memorized what I did. I want them to learn the topic. There's a difference between memorizing something and learning. And I would hate it if people are thinking like, oh, this person is really intelligent. He knows this, this, and this, and they're just reciting and copying what other people have said. So why do you think that? Those are the skills that I want to get. And I think being open and trying to understand stuff from that point of view is really important. And hopefully that can encourage people not to be so rigid in their ideas. I'd hate it if someone just copied and pasted me, but please don't.
I used to preface my lectures and I used to tell people that I don't want people leaving and doing something or saying something because I said so. I said, it's the last thing I want. You know, I need you to think about the topics that we're discussing and we're going through. You need to go over them, figure them out for yourself. You might choose the complete opposite to me and conclude in a different way. I said, but you need to go through that process. And that was actually one of the things I used to preface, particularly on my practical sessions. It was always something where I was like, look, the last thing I want is somebody out there regurgitating and saying what I've said, because it means it hasn't gone through another filter. If it goes through another person, you've thought about it as well, which means what is ultimately the end is hopefully better. I figured out, you know, because there's another person involved. So it was always, but yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I think it's, you know, it's so important. And I think particularly when you're at the head of that, you know, you are that leading authority as far as those students are concerned. And, you know, you've got a massive responsibility there in that people are tempted probably to go away and go, well, you know, Phil said so, he said this, which therefore means, and I guess this is the problem with social media in general, right? Is that people take, and particularly, you know, talk about COVID, right? You know, I know people are mocking it a little now, and they're putting a picture of some random bloke and going, such and such predicted COVID years and years ago. Well, no, actually he didn't. This is just a picture of a random bloke off the internet that I've just added this to. And,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
Like every Einstein quote.
yeah.
I'm sure Einstein didn't say that.
Einstein definitely didn't say that, but yeah, it's a changing world, and it's fascinating to get an insight, especially from somebody who's on the and I say front line. You're on the front line of it all. You're the person that's part of the team that are educating the coaches that are going to be coming through, the S&C guys, the researchers. All of those people are going to be in that field for a long time. So it's great to see that open-mindedness and you talking about things going, well, what I say isn't, don't take that as that's it. There's a little bit more to it than that, and you need to go away and think for yourself. So
was there like an instance with you that you realize, actually, I need to be a bit more open? Because I always find, and I've definitely got with me, there's a few instances in life where I'm like, there's more to this than I think.
100%.
Have you got like a few which are like key light bulb moments that have happened to you, thinking, I need to be more open?
Yeah, I don't think there's key ones. I think there was just this point where, and I think when I started, there was, and going back on what you said before, is there was a point there where there was a lot of people who were the authority, whether it was self-proclaimed or there was no other authority in the mix. When I started in this industry, there was certainly in the world of S&C, you got your data from very few places. I mean, if I wanted to pick up a study, I had to go to the British Library. When I did my
I remember those days.
Yeah, when I did my dissertation, it was literally, I sat in the British Library, and one of the longest processes of doing the dissertation, whereas nowadays it's a cut and paste, you can get all the, was actually typing the whole reference out. And once you get into several hundred of those, that's a long process.
Yeah.
And it was literally paper after paper after paper, and spending days down at the British Library. But it's a different world now, and I think there was a point there where I took what a lot of people who I respected and I looked up to as what they said was what it was. It wasn't a debate. They must have done the research, and they must have studied it, and they must have done all this. They've done the conclusions for me, so therefore I'm going to take what they tell me as fact. And I think that's the problem, isn't it? I think there's so many, and I think you've dealt with it in a really, really good way, because you said, look, I don't want you going away and repeating because all I'm doing, I'm sharing with you what I know and what I've concluded and what I've figured out, and said that I haven't read everything out there. I certainly, you're not going to keep up to date with all the studies because it's a nigh on impossible task, right? But I'm going to try my best to. And I think there was a point there where, I was reciting a lot of things that I'd heard from other people who I'd respected and thought knew better than me. So I used what they, and I'd reference them and say such and such said, and I'd be like, yeah, 5 years later, I was a bit of a mug, really.
Yeah, it's confidence, isn't it? Because that, especially when you're learning, that person's much more intelligent than I am. He must be right. So then you just lean into what they say, and then you realize, like, everyone should sort of doubt what they say, because it could change in a few years. Yeah. And once you get over that, or develop that confidence to think, actually, I'm going to look into this a little bit deeper, you realize there's a lot more to it than you first thought. And that's the exciting bit. And that's where people can generate their own ideas. So,
and I think if you're quite smart about it though, as well, Phil, right, is that you can, if I told you something, you just took it as, that's factually correct. I think when you're actually quite clever with it, I think you can actually find enough data to support your argument. And that was the thing, is that I think some of these things that people said, I'd actually go away, but I'd be so blinkered in that it'd be that, it would curate all of this data that supported what they said, and anything that didn't, I'd be like, oh, that must be rubbish. And you just cherry pick, right? And you just went down this cherry picking route. It was like you'd gone out cherry picking, and you'd be like, and this says, and this says, and this says. I'm going to put all that together. And if anybody ever questions me, I'm just going to share all these studies with them. And I know that for a fact, most of them can't read the studies. So that's the end of my argument. And it was literally like that for a long time. And it was, because, you never read all, every single bit. I mean, how long it takes to actually read and go through a study.
To do it properly, each paper would, let's say 4,000 word paper, 5,000 word paper, probably to do it properly, 45 minutes.
Yeah. And
Like
you've got
one paper.
people to scroll right to the end and go, what did they conclude? What did they
Yeah.
conclude? There you go. That's my conclusion as well. You know, and and when you get into, realizing that there's more to it than that, and, and you need a skill to do that. I mean, that's one of the great skills I learned from university was I can actually read a paper. I understand what I'm looking for and why I'm looking for it. And that was probably one of the best skills I took that from there, because I really struggled at university because a lot of the information was given to us in a format that I didn't get. I was really bad with just sitting and listening to somebody and it absorbing. I had to go away, and I used to write articles. I've explained this before. I used to write articles on the topic because it was the only way I could actually get it to sink in.
Yeah. That's the really important bit. I did a lecture. It was like a TED talk style lecture, not 2018, actually. Oh, that's ages ago. Where I talked about you as soon as you find your way of learning, you can learn anything. So it's not about being, I'm just automatically, I've been born a genius. So there's a way of unlocking your way of learning. And once you've done that, you can learn anything. And like, I didn't have the best A levels. And it wasn't until my third year of university, I realized I was doing everything wrong, because I would write notes based on like a textbook.
Yeah. And
then I'd memorize the notes. So anything that was slightly different to how it was in the textbook, it took a bit of outside thinking, it would just confuse me. So I would always get sort of like C to B grades, because, you need a bit more of a outside the box thinking to really answer the harder questions. So it made me realize, like, I wasn't learning, I was memorizing because I thought that's what I needed to do to pass the exams. And as soon as I did that, I just started reading loads of different types of books. And like, I'd read scientific papers, I'd read like Charles Dickens, I'd read all sorts of different things. Hence why you can see behind me, there's just piles and piles of books, is because I just suddenly realized that I've missed out on an opportunity here. And I read different types of literature. And that's helped it's helped me to communicate my ideas just through reading different types. And other things, I'm able to generate a story or a narrative with an essay, with a presentation. All of those different things have come from realizing, actually, this is how I learn. And that's difficult to find. Like, some people find that before the GCSEs. I found that in my third year of university. So it's,
it just happens that the way that they're taught is the way that they learn.
Yeah, exactly that. So I'm never the biggest fan of any type of exam which is just a memory task, because then you tend to, an exam which ends up being a memory task reminds me of the Smolov squat cycle. You do really well, and then obviously your gains just drop after that, because it's been such an intense period of memorizing or training. You don't retain it. And it's exactly the same thing. So that's why I like different forms of assessments, presentations, coursework. It allows you to be creative in different ways. So as soon as you find your way of learning, got some advice on like how I found it, so try and impart it with others, then you can learn anything. And that's helped me keep an open mind, is realizing that this is how I learn.
And that's probably the biggest issue I have with a lot of academia, is it's reciting information. It's the person with the best memory gets the best grade, and this was always the thing that irked me about a lot of the exams that I did when I was at school, because a lot of them were just memory tasks. And it was literally, you just had to read exactly what they told you to read, and the question was literally the sentence from the book. And and I could never feel, I just didn't, and it gave this kind of almost like a bittersweet thing. And I figured out why I wasn't very good at it. Several years later, just like you, it was probably my second year of university. I was like, this ain't working for me. I can't take in what they're telling me over the course of that 90-minute lecture. I just can't take it in. So I was like, right, so what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to write an article on it. So I used to write an article as I was expressing it to somebody else. Those articles never saw the light of day because they were horrendous, but it helped me learn, right? So I think there's some huge points there, I think, with respect to, and I think this podcast, I think, will be hugely beneficial, not just to our audience, but my kind of older audience, my audience of coaches and personal trainers, and the people who have gone to whatever degree of academia or are on that route right now. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some people who are probably going to be listening to this who will probably be on next year's course. So they'll be seeing you in a different light. But Phil, we've been on for quite a while, and we could keep this conversation going on.
I've got another 2 hours in me, but
easily,
I see it's 4 o'clock.
Easily, but I've got a feeling that the listeners probably don't have another 2 hours in them.
Yeah,
I would quite happily go
understandable.
Numerous tangents about things that probably aren't anything to do with the population. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I know that you've got a lot going on this week, and you kick off for real on, did you say Wednesday?
The inductions are Wednesday, Thursday, and then I start teaching on the 27th of September, so Monday.
That's great. And where can people find you, Phil, if they want to? Because you put quite a bit of your sort of training and things like that out on social, yeah?
Yeah, I try to be as honest and use the social media as a bit of a diary, and try and give my ideas out. And a lot of the time I give them out because I may be uncertain about them, so I want them critiqued. The feedback is what I'm chasing. But you can find me at Dr.Phil Price on Instagram. I am the Pricep on Twitter, but I'm not as active on Twitter.
Pricep?
Yeah. When I started,
like the bicep.
Yeah, when I started at St. Mary's, your email was your surname followed by the first letter of your first name. So it was Pricep. So I always called myself the Pricep. And then on Instagram, I thought, well, once I've done the podcast now, I probably should look a bit more professional. So I changed it to Dr. Phil Price. But I think Dr. Phil Price has taken on Twitter, so I just kept the Pricep on there. But that's where you can find me. Definitely a shout out to those that want to listen to my podcast as well.
Yep.
At The Progress Theory. We also have a website as well, theprogresstheory.com. So check out all of our content there. It'd be great to if everyone have a little listen, maybe give us a review, because we're always trying to improve our episodes. So yeah, if you're interested in sports science and how you can apply that, similar topics to what we've discussed today, definitely check that out.
Cool. Let's call it a day at that. Cool. That's awesome. Thank you once again for all your time, Phil, and we'll hopefully touch base again soon.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much. Mate. Take care.
Cheers.